This is Eastmans Elevated Podcast. I have on great guests that are really knowledgeable, consistently successful. We're able to dive deep down the rabbit holes of these different subject matters of shooting, of physical fitness, of mental toughness and drive. All the different skills that make up a complete hunter that you can become.
Here's your host, Brian Barney.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Got a brand new Eastmans Elevated for you. So on today's podcast, I have on Jesse Bruggenthies. So Jesse is super knowledgeable about bows. In fact, he names the number of bows he works on a year, and it's in the hundreds. I think it's in the thousands. It's like crazy, his experience with these bows. So we get down to like the nitty-gritty of what a really good, accurate, forgiving bow, like what's important with the setup and what's not. So it made for just a great podcast. Also, he's like a Western hunter, loves to hunt mule deer. And so we talked about mule deer hunting, and we talked about like hunting October, which is kind of that mid-season that's really tough to find a buck, but we chat about that. So it just made for this great podcast, great conversation. Like, I really enjoyed it, and I know you guys will enjoy it too. We'll get right into it here. Just want to thank a couple sponsors. So I want to thank Matthews. So Matthews, I've been using them now. Gosh, it's got to be 7-8 years I've been using Matthews, and I'm so impressed. We mention them on today's podcast. I really like that lift. I have that thing shooting so good. So it's all dialed in, broadheads in the quiver, been hunting bears with it, just looking for my opportunity. But that thing's going to be an absolute killer this year. So got a great sight tape built for it. It's just set up exactly how I like it. But Matthews is building forgiving bows that really hold up to the abuse that I throw at it each and every season. I've been having my truck my bow right in my truck, and I kind of put the top cam on the bottom, and it bounces down these reds. I've never had an issue, and this year I finally started putting the limb pocket to the bottom, which I think is a smarter move. But man, these Matthews, they just hold up. They keep in tune. I can shoot a bow from 3 or 4 years ago, and it's still perfectly tuned the way I left it, so it holds a tune really well. So if you're in the market for a new bow, check these things out. The guys at Matthews are absolutely outdoing themselves. Love that Phase 4. I love this new lift. Each and every year, it's my new favorite bow that I shoot. So check those guys out, and thanks to those guys for their support of the podcast. I also want to thank Savage. So Savage builds great out-of-the-box accurate rifles. So I have one all built up with a Sig Sauer scope, but it's just I had the thing sighted in within a handful of shots. It's how accurate it is, and just puts great groups downrange. They have a bunch of different models, including budget models. Like one of our favorite models at the Eastman's office is the 110 Ultralight. Comes in super lightweight, which is good to pack around the mountains. Bunch of different calibers that you can get for it. And super accurate, all their models. But that 110 Ultralight has a Accu stock, which you can adjust the length of pole, which is good for me with my T-Rex arms, and also the comb height, so that rifle just fits your cheek perfectly when you made up with the rifle. Also, they have the Accu trigger that you can adjust yourself to lighten up that trigger and make it for a more accurate pull. So check those guys out, producing great rifles over there at Savage. I also want to thank Stone Glacier. Man, I love all those guys and all their gear over there at Stone Glacier. They just absolutely outdo themselves. So I'm so impressed. I use their tents and their sleep system. So I really like their bivy tent for like the early season mule deer and some September elk hunting. It's the Stone Glacier Sky Air Ultra. You can add, like I've added a bathtub floor to it. I've added the vestibule on the front. So a bunch of add-ons. You can still keep it super light. I also, this year, I'm trying out the Sky Solace one-person, which is a 4-season one-person tent. Now, they come in around 4 pounds or so, but it's a 4-season tent with all the tie-downs, and you can really survive anything. So this would have been the perfect tent for goat hunting last year, where I was above tree line. We get gnarly winds, gnarly rains. Like, this thing's going to keep you safe no matter what. New Zealand's another good place for it. And also as we get into those later September hunts where a bunch of rain and snow is coming in, it's a great tent for that. I also have the Skyscraper 2-person. It's great because if you've got a buddy, you can share weight by carrying one tent. Same thing, 4-season, bomb-proof, going to get you through anything. I love their sleeping bags. They're right down to the temperature rating, so I use a 15-degree for most of the stuff I do. I have the 30-degree blanket that I'll do for early season scouting, August hunts, things of that nature. And then they also make a 0-degree for late season. So check these guys out. Check out all the gear that they have. Really appreciate their support. Love the company. Love the guys there at Stone Glacier. I also want to thank Black Ovis. Black Ovis is an internet retail shop. They carry all the top name brands as well as their own name brand. Check these guys out. They've got a knowledgeable staff. You can save 10% on your order with Elevated 10. And also check out Camo Fire. Camo Fire is an app where they have 80 new hunting deals that come up every 24 hours on overstock gear or just gear that they have a lot of. If you can find your size, if you can find what you need, you can save a pile of money. So you just download the app and the new deals will come flying in. Over at Eastman's, going to run over to the office here, so get this podcast out at Sunday, run over there for a Monday, Tuesday. We're doing some work on the Elk Collective, going to produce some content for that, so you can check that out. We still have the mule deer course, so if you have a mule deer hunt coming up, it's absolutely everything I know about mule deer hunting put in one course that's a video format. I really think this thing is a bargain where, for $100 or whatever it is, you can just shorten your learning curve, and this has taken me 20 years of traveling and hunting mule deer in all different habitats. Put in the promo code Brian MDC. That'll save you 10%, save you a little bit of money on that mule deer course. Of course, check out our Beyond the Grids. Just saw my final edit for a late season mule deer hunt in the snow and in the cold. Really proud of how that turned out. That'll be released this season. Dan's elk hunts are on there. I've got a couple mule deer hunts on there, so it should be a great season. And then, so you can check that out on the YouTube, Eastman's Hunting TV, Beyond the Grid. And, everything we're doing over there, the magazines. Just wrote a new article about shot execution. That's also the episode that Sean Mellon, he was on last week's Eastman's Elevated. It's a great episode if you haven't listened to it. All about hunting next level bulls. Check that out. You can check out all our podcasts. I have the other one I do with Dan Picard, Eastman's Bow Hunting Journal, Life of a Bow Hunter. It's on a different feed. Really proud we put out that bi-weekly, and I catch up with Dan. The last one we caught up with him on his New Zealand trip. And then also, we always seem to dovetail or mesh in like hunting deer and elk and how to improve your skills into it. So it's a great podcast. Check that out. And let's get into this one. So it's a good one. Jesse is Bergy Bowsmith on Instagram. You can check out his page there. And reach out to him if you want to have a bow worked on. He will also help you work through your own bow. He's going to get you the most accurate tune imaginable. Super knowledgeable. Really enjoyed the conversation and also enjoyed the hunting insight and hunting mule deer as well. So let's get into it. I'm your host, Brian Barney, Eastman's Elevated. Here we go. All right. Well, really nice to meet you, Jesse. Thanks for taking the time to being on the podcast. You're right on time.
Yeah, I know. Which, if you were to ask my fiance, this would probably be the first time I'm on time and not 2 minutes late,
Yeah, no, that's awesome. No, it's great. Really happy to have you. We share such common interests. So we're just talking before the podcast. So you're archery only, like I am, fully committed. You've actually never rifle hunted.
No, I've never picked up a rifle. I've never hunted with a rifle. I have held rifle tags, but I've taken my bow. And the only reason I've done that is to just extend my season. So I have went out west on a rifle tag, but took my bow and hunted with archery tackle during a rifle season. But I've never hunted with a rifle, no.
Dude, that's commitment to the bow, that's for sure. It does some things. I don't think it's a bad thing to use multi-weapons, and there's some guys that get really good at using all weapon types and taking advantage of the different seasons and the opportunities, and it does give you more more success. Like it seems like with the rifle, like the challenge is finding the animals and then executing and harvesting them can be easier. But I think when you keep to a bow hunter's mindset, it's why I like committed to it and changed over wholeheartedly, is like when you keep in that bow hunter's mindset, you're just improving your craft at bow hunting, which just makes you better all the way around. So it's super impressive, man.
Yeah, and honestly, part of it, I probably would have rifle hunted if there were different circumstances. But growing up, my dad is the one that kind of instilled the love of archery into me. And my dad had rifle hunted as a younger man, and then he ended up going to prison and becoming a felon. And so since he was a felon, once we grew up, if we wanted to go hunting, Dad couldn't go with rifles. So it was like, if you wanted to go and you wanted to spend the time outdoors with Dad, you had to use a bow. And so I started out shooting a bow when I was 5 years old. And, I just never, ever had the urge to stray away from it because I found success early. My dad instilled that practice mindset into me. I mean, I shoot hundreds of arrows a day, every single day. And so I just never really had the urge to go to a rifle. I've had the thought now, like in my adult life, of like, okay, if I go to Alaska where I can use any weapon, maybe bring the bow and on the last 2 days, take out a rifle. And I've been to Alaska and I never brought a rifle and I was still successful. So I guess it's just the world's way of telling me that I was meant to be a bow hunter, I guess.
Yeah, like I say, there's I learned a lot through rifle hunting, and I think it's a good way to start out too, so you can have a
Right.
little taste of success and then let your commitment level grow. And so like I definitely think, and some of these guys, like I am a little jealous at times, some of these hunts that they get to go on with a rifle where they get to hunt lower densities or where you may not get the opportunities, or like you say in Alaska where you're spending so much money, so much commitment, or like some of these sheep hunts where I'd be either I get it with my bow or I don't get it. It may be nice to have like another option there. So nothing against it at all, but I do believe that committing to archery has made me the bow hunter that I am, and I'm sure that's the same for you. Is like committing to that bow has made you the bow hunter you are. So, like, where are you located at, Jesse?
I'm in southeastern Minnesota, so I'm in a whitetail state. And I grew up whitetail hunting. I recently started turkey hunting, but where my real passion lies is mule deer hunting. Ever since I started mule deer hunting a couple years ago, that's all I think about. I mean, if I'm not holding 3 tags in my pocket going into the fall and choosing whitetails as a filler, I'm doing something wrong. So I do whatever it takes for me to go mule deer hunting as much as possible.
Gosh, you fell in love with mule deer and the Western style of hunting. It's pretty fun stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, and one thing, being from the Midwest, I live in bluff country. So I mean we have some ups and downs and hilly stuff that we gotta hunt. But one thing that I don't think any podcast, YouTube video, anything ever puts into perspective, my first ever Western hunt was on the Wasatch. And I don't think I could have ever prepared myself for the kind of elevation and the type of hiking that is required to hunt those high country mule deer. And like everybody, we always talk about it. You talk about it, being in the best physical peak performance that you can put out, and just having that never quit attitude. That goes a long way. But at the end of the day, as a Midwesterner, I'll be the first one to say it's a lot harder than people make it look. It's a lot harder than people think.
Dude, it's so extremely difficult. And yeah, like I'm a bit removed from it just because I've lived the last 25 years out west and been hunting mule deer. Like my body's just adapted to the mountains to where it seems fairly normal, but it is the absolute most extreme terrain. And even when you're in good shape, it still takes everything you have to climb every mountain. And that's the elevation as far as where it sits being lower in like having less oxygen, like that takes a tax on your muscles, it takes a tax on your lungs, on your oxygen. And because I think you're breathing less oxygen, your muscles are getting less oxygen, so they fatigue way quicker. And then just the extremeness of the terrain, it's like to climb 1,000 feet is nothing. You're doing that every day just to get to the vantage point. Like a lot of days you're doing 2 or 3 or 4,000 vertical. And like to put it in perspective, like Mount Everest, they let those guys climb 3,000 feet a day. Now, granted, they are at like 20,000 feet elevation, or like in the death zone or whatever. But they only let them climb 3,000 feet a day, and they climb and acclimate for months to get ready for it. So it's like to do that while you're mule deer hunting. You're right, man. It is extremely difficult, and you can wrap your mind around it, but it's just different when you're on it, isn't it?
Yeah, it was the most eye-opening experience, because I thought I was in pretty good shape. I still am in pretty good shape. I mean, I wrestled for a long time. Like, I know what hard work and good cardio is. And I think I was not successful on that trip. However, I did learn a lot, and I saw a lot of bucks. And I think my big key, I don't know if everybody does this or if this is just, us hardcore bow hunters, but when I come back from a hunt that's unsuccessful, I don't just go, oh, I was unsuccessful. I sat down and I go, what can I do next time to make sure that I could be either closer to success or successful? And for me, that first trip out west, I just overpacked. I had way too much stuff in my pack. And, I came home and, what I did is I ended up, before I left for the trip, I put like a little marker on all the items that were in my pack. And then when I would take it out of the pack to use it during the trip, I'd take the marker off. So at the end of the trip, I get home and I go, okay, this is everything that I used, and this is everything that I didn't even touch. Do I really need this? Now obviously I didn't touch my first aid. That obviously is going to go back into the pack. But all the other stuff, I was able to cut a massive amount of weight off in my next trip out west. I was far more successful that way.
Good for you. So you think, and I think we all have to make those mistakes too and learn from it. It's like, it's tough to have it all figured out when you first go, even listening to podcasts, even reading books, like whatever it is. Like, I think you need that personal experience for growth. So what do you think, if you had to put a weight on that pack, that first trip, like how many days did you go for? And like, if you can estimate, like minus your bow, minus the gear you were wearing and your binos, what do you think your pack weighed?
I would say minus my bow, I was there for 10 days, and I would put it somewhere in the upper 50s.
Yep.
I'd put it up in the upper 50s.
Dude, when I started, I started backpacking in Washington, where I grew up, with my dad. My dad was really hardcore for blacktails and elk and things, and more rifle than bow. I was like the first one in the family to pick up a bow, but we'd go backpacking into these spots as a kid. And you talk about clueless. Like, I know, like it was the 90s, but like our sense of backpack, we had the old frame packs and things, and then like I remember we used to pack Coca-Cola for our drinks in there, and just ding dongs and ho-hos, and like we just we made do, and we'd get back into country. I don't remember like being super heavy, but I just remember like some of the crap that we back along, and then we just didn't have lightweight gear, didn't know about it at the time. I'm sure it was out there for some of the mountaineers, but as far as hunting gear, there wasn't much out there. And then when I moved to Montana at 19, I had these visions of like, oh, I need to backpack into some of these spots to go hunt. I remember packing for like opening day elk, and I was going in there, and it was opening day of rifle season, and I was packing into this spot, and I just kind of day hunted during bow season. And I remember I had like an egg container I bought with like eggs I brought in that I was going to cook up. I just had so much stuff. Like you say, I mean, 60 pounds probably would have been light for what my pack was. I had so much stuff, and I remember it got so cold, I about froze to death. Like the first night, I had to wake up and make a fire in the middle of the night. But yeah, I think we need those growing pains, and like it sounds like you've been able to learn fairly quick just by your approach to it, like going home and figuring out what you don't need and what you do, and then being in the information day and age, just like researching information. But it sounds like you've made some major jumps and cut that learning curve fairly quick. You said you were successful on the next trip, which is, dude, it is. Mule deer are so tough to kill with a bow, aren't they? Man, those things are just so keyed in, so challenging, and then the terrain they live in, like I really think it's the ultimate challenge to kill those things. So were you successful the next trip out, or did it take you a couple more, or?
So my next trip out was not a high country hunt. It was an open country hunt. And I was successful on that trip. And that was my first time in that state. I'd never even been there. It was my first time in this area. I had only ever seen a mule deer in the wild like twice. So I didn't really know what I was looking for. What I did, the approach I took to it is I was like, okay, I'm not going to be super far from the truck, because I also went solo. I was all by myself. I didn't have anybody with me. And it was an October hunt, middle of October. So I knew it was going to be a little on the colder side. So I didn't want to be too far from the truck, just in case the amount of gear that I cut out of my pack, in case I got into like a safety situation. I didn't want to be too far from the truck that I couldn't get back to the truck. So I went. And first day I sat down, glassed, found some good bucks, and made a stalk, fell on my face multiple times, just blew stalks out. And then I decided on like day 3, I was going to go back to the truck, and I was going to move like 10 miles basically to the other side of this big stretch of BLM and hunt from the other side. And I moved to the truck, hiked off the road, like I was probably about 2 miles off the road, and I sat down and glassed, and there was a buck just sitting there right top third of a draw. I made a stalk. I busted him out of that draw, and luckily I was kind of on a high point, and I saw him bust out of the draw and go into the next draw, but I never saw him come out of that draw. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to take my time. I'm going to just slowly creep up. And I ended up creeping up, and there was this little knoll right at the edge of the draw. So I got behind the knoll, got an arrow ready, peeked up over, and sure enough, that buck was bedded down there at like 60 yards. And so I ranged him. I ranged a couple other things around him. And he ended up standing up, walking up, and standing right next to the sage bush that I ranged at 82 yards. I drew back. Pin was settled real nice. I just pull, boom, shot broke, and I just watched that arrow just sink right behind the shoulder. Perfect double lung shot. Buck ran 15 yards, looked at the does that he was with, and kind of like looked at them, tried to fight one of the does, and then just tipped over dead right there, right in front of me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that. It was just the most amazing feeling to finally arrow a mule deer.
Dude, that is wild. And like what a super adventure. Like coming from where you live, someplace totally different, a state you've never been to, and then a totally different hunting style too than hunting whitetails. And I know skills transfer over, and those whitetails are really crafty, but boy, I mean, to come out west and then kill a mule deer like that, and two, just like solo hunting isn't easy. Like it's easy to talk about here on the podcast, but boy, when you're going across the country and you're all by yourself, that's like an absolute super adventure, man. And then
Right.
to make a shot, I definitely like want to talk about mule deer and mule deer hunting, but you're really proficient with your bow, and that's like one of your big advantages, like hunting out, is like you knew you could make a shot, and then to execute one correctly at that range and put a double lung on them, man, that's just amazing.
Right. And one thing that I find the most difficult about solo hunting is when you wake up in the morning, you don't have your partner or your hunting buddy sitting next to you like, hey man, let's go. We got to get up to this glassing knob. It's like, if it's cold in the morning and and you get up and you've just been getting your butt kicked on stalks for the last 3 days, it's really easy to just kind of sit in that tent and go, oh, what's another half hour of sleep or this or that. And just that mindset when you're solo to just be like, hey, you have to get up, you have to go to this glassing knob, otherwise you're not going to be there in time, and then your whole day is messed up, and you already came all the way across the country and you're already here. Like, just get out of your sleeping bag. But it's so easy when you're getting beat up for 4 or 5 days solo in the backcountry to just be like, what's another half hour of sleep? Or I don't need to glass anymore. Like, let's just go back to camp and make lunch. And that was the hardest part for me right in the beginning. Luckily, I just persevered through it. My old wrestling mindset kind of just told me to just never quit. And I had pretty decent cell service in that spot too. So I had, people from home that were motivating me. But yeah, that was the hardest part of being solo for the first time out west, is just that mindset.
Yeah, dude, makes total sense. The self-motivation, the discipline, and especially the discipline when nobody's watching. It's like different if you got a crowd of people. And then I love how you mentioned like the wrestling mindset. I think wrestling makes for like such a good it's like such a great way to build that mental toughness, or it's such a great base or foundation to be a Western hunter, or whatever you're gonna do in life. But that wrestling taught me like a lot of great life lessons as well. It just teaches you toughness. It teaches that self-discipline. Like, I remember running every day and there was nobody watching, nobody paying attention, but the payoff was like during those matches, those extra practices, staying after practice, the giving your full effort, the running when nobody's watching, the wrestling freestyle, like it's all self-discipline, because nobody's watching after you for every minute to make sure that you succeed. It's like up to you to make sure you succeed. And so that like carried over really well to your mule deer hunting.
Yeah, and in wrestling, you're the only one that can lose your match. It's not anybody else's fault but yourself if you lose a match. Same thing when you're out west on the mountains. It's nobody else's fault if I don't go to that glassing knob. It's nobody else's fault if I don't make that stalk, or I don't make this mistake and learn from it. It's nobody else's fault but my own. And now I almost prefer to hunt solo now, because it's just like I know the work that I put in. I don't want to be strapped to somebody who maybe didn't put as much work in, or somebody who doesn't want to go as far as I want to go. Like, I almost just prefer to hunt solo now, because I know that at the end of the day, the success or the failure on that hunt is solely on me and nobody else.
Dude, makes sense. Yeah, and even like I definitely like hunting with buddies, but even when we hunt together, the majority of time we're sharing a camp and then hunting by yourself, throughout the day, and then meeting back at camp or whatever. There's times where I team up with the cameraman, but then I'm really the team leader in that group, to be able to dictate where we go. But yeah, man, I totally get it. That's me too. And you're way stealthier by yourself, and you just don't have to. You don't have to take into account anybody else when you're making decisions. It's all for yourself. So yeah, it makes total sense. Well, that's super impressive to be able to find success like that. Like, mule deer success with the bow and arrow, I mean, even in some of the best units, it's still only 20-30%, and that's a mule deer every 5 years. So to be able to come from a totally different place, a totally different style of hunting, and start to pick it up and quickly learn how to find success, man, that's amazing.
And I'll be honest. I've never used more than 2 points to get into a unit ever. And 95% of my tags are general tags, over the counter, or 0 points to draw. I'm of the mindset, like, would I love to hunt 5-point units on a rotation? Yes, I would love to. But I just want to hunt. I just want to be there. I don't care if I have to work super hard for 14 days, or if I have to go back for another 7 days and make it a 21-day total thing. I just want to hunt, because when I do draw that 5 to 8 point tag, I don't want to be hunting mule deer for the first time in this country. I want to have a lot of experience built up. And then when I draw that 5 to 8 point tag, then I can get picky and I can start being like, okay, this is kind of the caliber of buck that I'm looking for. And I prefer it that way. I just like being out there in wild places, and success or no success, it's always a win for me when I get to be in wild places with a bow in hand.
Good for you. Yeah, same, man. It's like cut from the same cloth. It's like it's more about your hunting skill set than it is about some unit. And even those units that take more points, it's still mule deer hunting. It just doesn't. There aren't giants around every tree, and I think you can really find a giant anywhere. Like, it comes down to that skill set that you've built, and so. Man, same. I hunt a lot of 0-point units and a lot of low-point units, and you can really find some great bucks in those units. And like you say, yeah, it's nice to mix in a higher point unit here or there, or really set your sights a little bit higher if you know they have that type of buck in there. But really, you can find a giant buck in a 0-point unit or a 2-point unit. And I think there's like less of a correlation between, it's like these points. It doesn't always mean it's a superb unit as well. It's just gotten popular, but, they don't always live up to the expectations either. It's like if you've got like this good hunting skill set and you can go in and find mule deer, gosh, you can just find some dynamite, some of the best hunting in the country and low point units and things. And it's also like less pressure or less popular. I think sometimes you go in those higher point units that's known for big mule deer and known for good country. And, it's like everybody's trying to target those bucks, where if you go in a little bit lower densities, or if you go where they're not known for giants there, or it doesn't take as many points to draw, it seems like you can kind of find your own experience in there. And I think, I almost prefer hunting those units more than high point units. Now, don't get me wrong, like I'd love to hunt the Ponsagons or Books Cliffs or, somewhere special like that. But there's just some really good hunting out there in low point units. So, man, you're spot on. So you like to put in for a couple, 2-3 states a year, huh?
Yeah, typically 2 to 3 states. And like I said, low point units. I mean, the place I went to a spot last year that I had where I killed my first mule deer. And I was in there and I was passing 150-inch bucks because I knew that there was something better in there because I had seen them in there prior. And I ended up making a stock, probably the best stock that I'll ever have in my near future. And I made a stock on this buck. He was probably in the high 160, low 170 range. And I made this stock. It was like 3 miles from where I glassed him. And it was like 3 miles of hiking. It was probably only like a mile straight shot from where I glassed him. And I make this big long hike early in the morning. He was still in his first bed. And I get up, I'm at like 300 yards. I want to say I was at about 300 yards. And I just peek over the ridge and I watch him stand up out of his first bed, walk 12 yards and bed down on the other side of this little outcropping and bed right back down. I ended up stalking in so close. I was sitting in his first bed, watching him in his second bed at 12 yards. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh God, I think I got a little too close, because as a bow hunter, like I got to still draw, And so I thought about drawing back, standing up and just basically walking down on him and shooting him. But I couldn't tell based on, because I had watched him stand up one other time and like re-bed, but I couldn't tell which direction he was bedded. I couldn't tell if he was bedded quartering to me, broadside, quartering away, or just directly facing away from me. So I took the safe route and I just sat in that bed, and then I watched his head start moving a bunch. I knew he was going to stand up, and he stood up, and I was already at full draw when he was standing. And sure enough, he was bedded directly away from me. I shoot a fairly heavy arrow. I could have Texas heart shot him, but the bow hunter and the sportsman in me, I was like, this is such a low percentage, terrible idea. Like, don't do it. And I just sat there at full draw, hoping that he would catch my movement. and then turn towards me a little bit, and I could slip it right behind his shoulder. He never did that, and he ran off. So uh, I did not fill my tag on that hunt in that area, but I learned so much, and I love that because when I go to these other units in these other states, I can just take all of that knowledge and I can just apply it to the next hunt. And with mule deer, the crazy thing, like you always talk about, is they live everywhere from the desert floor to 13,000 feet, and the deer on the desert floor act a lot different than the deer at 12,000, 13,000 feet do. And so like learning them in all these different scenarios is insane. They're very, very elusive critters.
Dude, that's killer. Yeah, it's yeah, well, good job you didn't let the moment get the best of you and try to put an arrow like at 12 yards and your arrow, and like you say, it probably would have killed him, or I know those shots kill him, but that's like me. I just can't take that shot either. Just ethically for me, if it went wrong, I just never forgive myself.
Yeah.
And so I've
Yeah,
got to just wait for a better angle or a better shot. But yeah, man, they're crafty. They're so tough to get the better of, you know? But that's wild to spend that time like inside 12 yards of that buck from his first bed. Yeah, what a stock, what a play, man. So intense.
Yeah, I was in there. I was at 12 yards for 45 minutes before he stood up. So I was there for a while. You know, there was a lot of nerves going through my body. There was a lot of things in my head going, like a lot of scenarios playing, like, oh, do I draw on my knees, stand up and just shoot him in his bed? Do I wait till he stands? Do I stand up then draw? Like, what do I do? You know, and it's just like, I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to play it safe, let him stand, and I'll draw as he stands, and hopefully he turns. But, you know, it was not that deer's day to go home with me. So.
Yeah, the deer's day, not yours for sure. Yeah, you got the better of you. Yeah, dude, that's so wild. Why did he finally blow out, you think? You think he caught like a whiff of your scent, or you think he caught some movement? What do you think it was?
Well, I know what it was. He definitely saw me, but because I watched him turn and look at me while I was sitting at full draw on him, and I thought that when he turned his head to look at me, that you know how if they're kind of if they're facing away from you and a deer needs to look directly behind them, usually they'll kind of shuffle their butt end over so that they don't have to like crank their head 180 degrees. This deer, he never shuffled over, because when he was going to shuffle, I was going to shoot him. But he never shuffled, and so he just looked at me, looked forward, and then he's like, yeah, I'm out of here. And then he just bounded off, you know? And I was like, come on, man. Like, you couldn't have just shuffled over just a little bit, like 2 yards, and I would have had a shot if he would have just shuffled a little bit. But didn't work out.
Yeah, when they're that close, they just don't put up with anything, do they? And some of the close mule deer that I've shot at those ranges or whatever are some of the most special memories and special ones. But yeah, they just don't put up with much. But you know, and sometimes they do look through you or don't see or don't catch that movement. Like I know, like a really good buck I shot one time where I kept slipping down and couldn't find him. I knew he was in that group of trees somewhere, and I'd kind of like lost my reference to where exactly in those trees. And I remember slipping down, and then all of a sudden he picked his head up, and he was like at about that 10 or 12 yards or something, like right there. And he looked right at me like through my soul, and I didn't move. And then he put his head down to feed again, and I was able to draw and shoot him right there, which was wild.
That's insane.
But they just don't put up with much. I kind of like to stop like a little bit further back, but sometimes the country doesn't lend itself to that, to where you can't see the buck then when he stands or whatever, which was probably the case for you there, right?
Yeah. Where he was bedded in the direction that the wind was coming, it was either 12 yards or I'm coming from the bottom of the draw up at him. And obviously that's not the play, because he's bedded facing downhill. I cannot come from the bottom of that draw. And if I tried to go over the top of him, he definitely would have winded me. So yeah, I would definitely prefer to be in that 30 to 45 yard range. Ideally is where I'd prefer to be. I think you get a little bit more freedom there, especially for guys like you and me who are short. We get away with a lot more stuff four guys do. And for me, like, I get away with quite a bit of movement. I'm 5'7", so I can tuck up behind a sagebrush pretty easy, And so yeah, I definitely prefer to be in that 30 to 45 yard range.
Yeah, same. It's like the one advantage we have as smaller guys, because you can hide behind a blade of grass, It's like,
Right.
man, it's like, it is a real advantage for moving because so many times when you're moving, you've either got to be crouched over or, then you've got to be duck crawling. Like you remember the old crawl drills in wrestling,
Oh yeah.
or your hands and knees, or you're on your belly, or like you kind of do like whatever the situation requires that has to be done to get in. But you can just imagine if you were 6 foot or 6 foot plus, you're just not going to hide as well as us smaller guys are. So yeah, it's a real advantage bow hunting, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I I always tell my long draw tall buddies, I'm like, I'd love to have a 30-inch draw length, but I'm a lot sneakier than you and I kill more stuff. So I think I'll stick with my 28-inch draw length.
Yeah, I like that. Well, we started like by talking about backpack hunting, but yeah, it sounds like you're taking advantage of all the different habitats to hunt these deer, from the desert to the foothills to the high country. It's pretty fun to embark in some of those different habitats, and I think, like, there's a lot of guys that are keyed in on the high country and hunting that stuff, and it is good, and they grow big there, and it is the most extreme bow hunting you can go do. So it's like really fun, and those hunts are really near and dear to my heart. But I also just like all these different other habitats that you can hunt, and I think there's like some dang good mule deer hunting in these other habitats, and not that you can't backpack or shouldn't backpack in these, like a lot of times you should, but it does kind of lend itself to being able to truck camp and day hunt or overnight hunt as well, and kind of use your truck as a base camp, and it's actually can be more efficient and effective because these foothills or breaks or badlands or whatever it is, like sometimes you're hunting 200, 300 square miles, and the deer aren't spread out throughout the unit, and so like being able to use your vehicle to be able to be mobile, and then like be able to heat check different zones and really find where the deer are hanging, and then you focus your effort in there, hiking in there, camping in there, whatever it is. But there are like different tactics for hunting those mule deer depending on the habitat, the terrain, the access of a unit. Like you kind of, it can be different like per unit that you're hunting, like how you're going to hunt them, right?
Right. Yeah. And for me, like the one thing I really like about like open country hunting when I was like a newer mule deer hunter is it's kind of like I hate to use this word, but I can't think of a better way to describe it. You might be able to, but it's more of like an instant gratification because you can see a lot further, you can see a lot more country, you can see a lot more wildlife. So you can kind of, sit down in a high point in some of these open country spots and you can see more deer quickly. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm not a total idiot at mule deer hunting. I can find them. Now I just need to find the right one. Versus in the high country, you get into some of those basins, it can be pretty hard to pick out those bucks at times, especially if you're not early season when their nice and autumn burnt orange colored coat is shining across the basin. It can be pretty hard to pick them out when they start getting a little on the gray side up in the high country for sure. So yeah, just different tactics, different mindsets. The other thing that I found mind blowing is like when I was e-scouting is I find a trail and I'm like, okay, 6 miles in, and then I'm going to go a mile off the trail and this is where I'm going to hunt. I shouldn't run into anybody. And I get like 5 miles back and I'm still running into hikers. I'm like, these people are insane hiking out here. You're like 6 miles from the nearest road. Like what? That doesn't happen here in the Midwest. Like people don't leave their trucks. And so like seeing people 5 miles into the backcountry, it was kind of an eye opener. The first time I went out to the high country, I was like, I don't know what you guys are doing out here, but hey, good for you. So it's just it's a different mental game more so, I think, depending on the terrain. And you just got to know going into it, like in the open country, I need to hunt them like I'm hunting open country. And when you're in the high country, you have to just hunt them a little bit different. You have to be more aware of other things. And so I think that's just a learning curve that we all kind of figure out what works best for us.
Well, and you're so committed when you're backpacking into a spot with 10 days worth of stuff as well. It's like you're really committed to those basins and locations that you're headed to. And, if you do find people, it's like a way tougher to relocate, to keep moving, and sometimes you just can't get away from the pressure, to where, yeah, if you're hunting, more of that open country that you're talking about, like if you run into another hunter, you can definitely relocate, a few miles away with your vehicle, or 10 miles away, like you had stated earlier, and then pretty soon you're just in this new place that you have to yourself. So it is like you're just so committed when you're backpacking, and I love it. It's like a real pure form of bow hunting, carrying everything you need on your back. But there too, it has its advantages of, being able to be mobile and use that. And two, like, a lot of the open country you're talking about is like, once I find a good area, well, then I can really commit myself and I can backpack in there and take a 3 days. And boy, you can,
Right.
it seems like in roaded country or in high pressure country, it's like when you're willing to backpack in there, it seems like you get back in some of those remote stretches and there's nobody back there, to where the wilderness, everybody knows they have to backpack. And so everybody's using that tactic. So you can also like be able to use that backpacking tactic in roaded country or whatever and have great success doing it as well.
Yeah, for sure. And like you were saying, it's just a bunch of different tactics for the different situation that you put yourself in. But if there's one thing as a Midwesterner that I would tell somebody that wants to go mule deer hunting and that is just like super skeptical about high country or open country or whatever, is just get a tag. Just get a tag and then figure it out after you have the tag in hand and you're like, okay, this is the unit I'm going to, this is the state, this is the type of terrain, and then just e-scout and e-scout and e-scout. Now, we'll probably dive into this a little bit more, but when I first started going out west, like I couldn't afford to go out and do a scouting trip. I was still in college, and then when I graduated college, I worked in a bow shop down in Texas. I moved back home from Texas and started Bergy Bowsmith to pay for my hunting tags so that I could go scouting and scout these areas. So if you don't have the time to go out and put boots on the ground and scout, like just have a plan A, B, and C and just go hunting. Just go hunting, because the more years that you sit and you don't get a mule deer tag in your pocket, that's one less year that you're learning and learning and learning, and one less year that you're out of your quote unquote prime physical capabilities to go do these things. So if there's one thing that I could go back and do different, I would have started buying tags earlier than what I did.
So true, man. Such great advice. Yeah, I love that Bergy Bowsmith, like your side hustle, has been able to help you pay for like a lot of your adventures out west. So like I definitely want to talk about it. Dude, it sounds like you are really good at working on these bows, and so you've kind of taken your bow knowledge to the next level, and now guys are shipping you their bows to set up and things, and for good reason. Like you're really spending time in the details of setting these things up to make sure that guys are getting a finely tuned machine. But man, I just couldn't love that more, that you've turned your side hustle into paying for like your true love of coming out west and hunting mule deer. That's just awesome, man.
Yeah, and for me, it just came down to like I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted this to be a major part of my life. It was before, but I wanted it to be something that I didn't have to think about financially. And so I knew that I had a skill set that I could bring a service to the market, but not a skill set that I was willing to sacrifice quality to make more money. I'm just not willing to sacrifice high quality work to make more money and get more people in the door and out the door. I'm just not willing to do that. And I never will be willing to do that. And I think that's the hardest part for me, is because like I would love for this to be a full-time thing, but I don't want to sacrifice quality, because that's what got me to where I am now. And if I stray from that, then you start losing those loyal. Some of these guys that ship bows to me have been shipping bows to me for 6 years plus. and I get their bow every single year. I hear from them once a year when they ship their bow to me. Some of these guys I've never even met or talked to on the phone, and they just trust me that much, and they have that much faith that it's just like, I'm not willing to sacrifice the quality to have more quantity and make more money. So I'm okay with it being a side hustle. I'm okay. I did 784 bows last year, which is quite a lot.
Oh my
as a side
gosh,
hustle.
dude, that is so many.
It's quite a lot. But I could do probably double that before I would have to bring somebody else in to really make sure that the quality is still there. But I have, everything is very strict, very to the T. From the time I receive a customer's bow, as long as the strings are here, it'll be shipped back out, fully tuned, ready to hunt within 24 hours. Whether it gets here on a Saturday or whether it gets here on a Tuesday, it doesn't matter. I turn around bows in 24 hours. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, unless part of the build is not here. Like if the strings aren't here yet, obviously it's going to take, I got to wait till the strings get here. But once the strings get here, 24 hours from the time the strings are here, and that bow is going back to the customer and back in their hands so that they can get shooting and go hunting. And my sole goal is to just make better bow hunters, because we hear all the horror stories every single year, and I hate hearing it. I hate thinking that people might fall out of love with archery because they had a bad experience, and I want to be there to answer the questions and make sure that it's set up right.
Dude, that's beautiful. 784 bows, dude. That's wild. Man, you are hustling. I don't know that I grasped how many bows that you're doing through your custom shop, but I really feel like you're filling a niche in the industry. Like, I think there's some really good bow shops out there that take the time to set up bows, but they have to get customers in and out. And so it's the whole reason why I started teaching myself about working on bows. Was just so I could get a better tune. So I knew more about the bows and the inner workings of them. So, I mean, and there's just nothing like a finely tuned machine. Like when you get that bow shooting and you find that tune, and it's not always like, man, like it doesn't always come easy with these bows. A lot of them you have to mess with quite a bit to be able to get a really good tune in them. So you have guys shipping you the bows, shipping you their arrows, or you're building their arrows for them or something like that, and then you're getting a good tune in that bow to send back to them, right?
Yeah. So the only thing I don't do is arrow builds. I do have a guy that will build arrows for me. My whole mindset is kind of along the lines of quality when it comes to that as well. If I take the time to build a set of arrows to like match grade, the buzzword in the industry right now, match grade. If I were to build arrows to match grade and have to tune the bow, the process just takes so long that one of them is more than likely, when I'm really busy, going to suffer, whether it's the arrow build or the quality of the tune. And I'm just not willing to sacrifice on one of those. So I have a guy that's all he does is arrows. And so if a customer of mine does want arrows, I usually just send them through him instead of making the extra money on the arrow build and having to worry about, making sure everything is right. I'd rather just focus on the bow. But everything I do is all bare shaft tuned. I have guys send me 2 arrows, 1 bare shaft and 1 fletched shaft. And what I'll do is I will start at, basically I'll set everything up right dead nuts down the center of the bow. In manufacturer spec, I'll make sure that the cam lean is good, that you don't have excessive cam lean. I tie knock sets on the top and the bottom, brand new D-loop, put new strings on, make sure everything's in spec, good to go as far as manufacturer spec goes. Then I'll shoot a bare shaft through paper at about 6 feet, and I'll shim accordingly until I get a bullet hole at 6 feet. And then I'm going to back up to 15 yards, and I'm going to send a bare shaft through paper at 15 yards. And I'm usually going to rotate the knock a bunch to see if The arrow just needs to be shot in a different position to bullet hole. If not, I'll take the best tear and then I will either yoke tune, I'll shim it again if I have to, or, some of these new bows have like set technology and deadlock or all these other things. I'll do that to get it as close to a perfect bullet hole as possible without moving the rest. And then at 15 yards, if I do have to move the rest, it's usually 1 to 2 clicks. Get it shooting perfect bullet holes, and then I'll shoot their fletch shaft just to confirm, and I'll shoot that at 6 and 15 yards, and then I'll mark both of them to which side needs to go up. So that when the customer gets them back, usually I just tell them, hey man, if you're gonna refletch your arrows, strip them all down, build a makeshift paper tuner, and just launch them in and rotate the nock until they bullet hole, and then fletch them accordingly. And 95% of my guys do that, and they'll usually walk right out to the range, go to their maximum effective range, and broadheads and field tips will hit right together, no issues, and they're off to the races.
Yep. That's the way it should be done. But man, you got like a really good process, it's like for me that's setting up like a handful of bows a year, like a couple for my buddies, one for myself. It's like takes me a little bit longer to find it, but I think it's so important, like you say, the factory specs, the power path of the string, to really mess with your shims or your yoke tuning to find a good tune in it, more so than moving the rest around like a big distance. Like you say, a click or two here or there isn't a big deal, but man, and when you're marking your shafts, you're actually like finding the spine of the arrow that's getting along with that bow, and then you're trying to find it consistently. And so that's why you're having your guys shoot all their shafts, make sure that they're paper tuning perfectly. And bare shaft tuning, it's like it accomplishes the same thing as paper tuning, but it's like bare shaft tuning seems to show more than when you have fletchings on the arrows. Like the
Right.
rip is further. It's like a finer way of tuning. And I do like also that you're tuning them at first at 6 feet and then backing up, as I think that shows arrow flight too. Because sometimes at 6 feet you can just find the right oscillation of the arrow to get a good paper tune, but it's actually not tuned perfectly. So like being able to scoot back. But man, it's like tuning that many bows, like you've got a great process. So these guys are getting back these bows, and there is just nothing that shoots like a finely tuned bow. Like I had tuned my buddy's Dan's the other day, not Dan Picard, but another one of my buddies, Dan. And it's like amazing. It just took the process further than he had taken it in the tune, and now he's shooting better groups than he's ever shot before. And he's good at working on bows and has done his own stuff for years, and he has like good knowledge. But just to take it that step further, like where you're taking it, it sure makes a difference in the bow and the way it shoots, and it shows in your groups. And then also, like you say, you don't got to mess with anything with your broadheads or your field points. They just hit the same because that
Right.
bow is finely tuned. So there's no broadhead tuning. Like, of course, I always want to check it or fine tune it, but I never have to move it after I get a good tune in that bow. They just always hit the exact same on there, So, man, I think that process that you're running these guys' bows through, like it fills a real niche in the industry. Like now these guys can send you their bows and really trust that they're going to get them back as like really good shooters, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, and one thing that a lot of people don't realize, I hear this all the time from my customers, is you can actually hear the difference between a well-tuned bow and a not well-tuned bow. A perfectly tuned bow will have like, just when you shoot, it's like just a slight little thump on the shot, versus like a bow that is just even slightly out of tune is significantly louder than a bow that is perfectly tuned. And a lot of my guys get their bows back and they're like, what did you do to make my bow quieter? I'm like, nothing. I was like, I didn't do anything to make it quieter. It's just tuned properly. A bow is a machine. And I think a lot of people forget that bows at the root of it all, they are a machine, and they are designed to shoot in one location and be the most efficient, the most accurate, the most forgiving, and the most quiet in one position. And that position just happens to be on every single bow where they were designed to shoot, and where they shoot broadheads and field points exactly together with perfect arrow flight. And once guys finally like get a taste of that and they're like, oh my God, my bow is so much quieter. It shoots so much more forgiving. It holds better. They're just like, it's almost like they fall in love with archery all over again.
Yeah. Huh, I hadn't keyed into that about the noise of a bow, but yeah, as you're like explaining it, I can definitely hear it. Or definitely like see where that would make a difference. Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing when you get a finely tuned machine, man. It just puts them in there like that, like you want them to, and it's more forgiving. It's like when you mess up, like say your pin starts to drop out of it, or your pin's to the left when the shot breaks. It seems like your shot misses by less too. It's just more forgiving, and that's what you want out of archery is forgiveness. So like I also think like a big part of it is like making sure that those arrows are really spined well to the bow, but it sounds like you're making all these arrows tune pretty good, because you can mess with the tune to get a shaft to tune. But do you ever get like a bow or an arrow that just doesn't match up, where the cut's wrong or too weak of a spine, where it's like you got to call the guy and go, hey, you really need a stiffer spine there? Or are you able to make a lot of these different arrows as long as they're close tuned through that bow?
As long as they're close, you can usually get them to tune. Out of my personal bow, and I'm shooting 77 pounds at 28 inches, and I can shoot everything from a 400 spine to a 200 spine and get a bullet hole out of my bow.
Yep.
But when it comes to a customer's bow, if I ever do have one that's like kind of finicky, usually I can get it to tune. If it's on the weak side, usually they can't get it to tune and they can't get it to shoot accurate. I can almost always get it to shoot accurately. And I'll tell them, I'll be like, hey, you're like riding a fine line. You got a 175 grain broadhead on a 350 shaft and you're a 29-inch draw length at 75 pounds. Like, and you should probably look at going to a 300 spine, and you'll have a lot better luck. And usually they'll struggle with like a knock high or low tear, or a high right or a high left tear, and I'll bullet hole with it nonstop, and then they'll go to a 300 spine and then they'll shoot just fine. So I think that also kind of plays into it too. Like I do have really good form and it's very repeatable, and not everybody has that, but the stiffer spines tend to be a little bit more forgiving in my experience.
Yeah.
For people that don't have great form.
I agree 100%, man. It's like yeah, it's I'd shoot, I'm only a 26.5-inch draw, and I cut my arrows really short. I can cut them, at 25 inches. I can even go a bit shorter than that with the shaft. And so, yeah, for me, I could always make 400s tune just fine and shoot just fine with a 125 head on it. But I do find that a 350 spine is just a better match for my bows and more forgiving of a shot. And so I never had trouble with it. But yeah, I did go to just like a little bit stiffer spine. And I don't know that I shoot it any better, but I just think the better match your arrow is with your bow, like the more forgiving shot you're going to get. So I don't know if it makes a difference or not, but the 350s definitely shoot good for me. But yeah, that makes good sense. And like you say, like really good repeatable form is great for accuracy. It's like those arrows just come out the exact same way every single time. It's repeatable, and makes for really good groups. Well, dude, that's amazing. It sounds like you've grown quite the side business. So Bergy Bowsmith, like, what's the best way for guys to get a hold of you if they want to pick your brain or want to have you set up their bow for them?
The best way to get a hold of me is either on Facebook, Instagram, and all the social medias. I'm on it as Bergy Bowsmith in some sort of variation, whether it's one word or with an underscore. I'm on all the social medias that way. If it's something super serious that like needs my attention right away, message me on Facebook and I can shoot you my phone number, and you can call me. I spend hours a week on the phone with guys helping them diagnose problems. But one thing I do want to mention that I do that's also different than any other pro shop is it like if you make a mistake and something happens to your bow and you're in a bind, I'm not going to charge you twice to fix it. So Like, let's say you're shooting and, you go over, you're hunting and you walk over a barbed wire fence and you cut 6 fibers off your string. Call me up, let me know. We'll get you a new string. I'm not going to charge you labor. We'll get it swapped out. We're going to get it right back to you. That's who am I to try to nickel and dime somebody out of it? Like, I get it. My time is money also, but at the root of it, my mission statement of my business is to just create better bow hunters and make friends along the way. That is my mission statement. Create better bow hunters, make friends along the way. And if I just try to nickel and dime people, I feel like I lose a lot of trust and a lot of integrity on my side. So, like, I help people over the phone all the time for free. And it makes me happy knowing that I can help bow hunters become more efficient and more accurate or more confident. So usually I only charge people once per bow.
Dude, it's like man, it's like you just sound like so authentic, and it sounds like your mission statement. You're not just saying it, like you believe it wholeheartedly, and it sounds
It's a
like
terrible business model. It's a terrible business model for making money, but it's great for making friends.
Yeah, I'm the same way where I just, I don't charge for my time, and I'm really trying to help guys out, and it's like that same thing. It just man, and I can sleep good at night too, like I know I'm not ripping anybody off or taking advantage of anybody, and so I'm providing a really good service for these guys. So yeah, dude, yeah, I believe it when you say it. That's amazing. I think you really are helping a bunch of guys out. So like for your services and things, like there's a lot of moving parts. They've got to ship you the bow, you ship it back, but like what do you charge for setting up a bow?
Yeah, so typically strings are paid for upfront, just because all string sets are custom. And if you decide to back out of the deal, then I'm not stuck with your strings. So I always charge people for the strings upfront. If you do decide that you back out of the deal, which I've never had happen, I'll just send them to you, and then you have them. But the strings, it varies depending on how many piece set you need. But the tune is just $150 flat rate plus shipping. I ship everything with Pirate Ship. And if you guys are frequent flyers at UPS, start using Pirate Ship. I've never paid more than $30 to ship a bow across the United States. And that's with $1,000 insurance on it. So I use Pirate Ship. I tell my customers to use Pirate Ship. In most cases, if you drive a full-size truck, it will cost you less to ship it to me than it would for you to drive to your local archery shop if your local archery shop is further than 20 miles. Usually end all be all, depending on if you got a 5-piece set or a 2 to 3-piece set, or the primes have those 7-piece sets. You're looking at anywhere from $300 to $350 total.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's awesome.
Which I think is very, very fair for the level of service they're getting, and with shipping included. There's not a lot of shops that you can even buy strings for under $250.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%, man. Yeah, pirate shipping, huh? And that's done through UPS. Like, what is it? Like a site you go to, or how do you?
Yeah, it's a website. It's called pirateship.com, and you just make an account. It's like stamps.com. Mm-hmm. If you're familiar with stamps.com, it's like that. It's like they're just like a broker for all of the shipping agencies. And so what you do is you like type in your box. So like, let's say my box is a 41 by whatever, and this is my address and this is where it's going. It'll broker your deal to all the other shipping agencies, and it'll give you the best price. And usually it's UPS. And I like UPS better than USPS anyways. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I've never paid more than $30 to ship a bow across the country.
Oh, that's great, man. So these bows, I bet when guys call you, so much experience with them in the tune, man, guys can just be pulling their hair out trying to get a bow to shoot for them. But that's wild that you can diagnose a lot of those problems through the phone of what that bow's doing. You have them check something, maybe factory spec, take some measurements, what things are going, and you can actually figure out what's going on with that bow.
Yeah, that is a process. That is definitely a process. There's a lot of questions that have to be asked. And unfortunately, a lot of people just take to social media and then, social media will chew up and spit out about 700 different answers. And then this person goes and starts messing with their bow. And then now it's way worse than it was in the beginning. And so usually like my phone calls always start with the basic questions. Is your bow in spec? Are your cams timed? And is your rest in the center? And if any of those is no, okay, you got a problem. Like we got to figure this out first, then we're going to go to this, and then we're going to go to this, and then we're going to shoot. And then usually my following question is, do you have a press or do you have access to a press? If they don't have a press, it's like, well, you can't fix it the right way without sending it to me or going to a bow shop that knows what they're doing. If you do have a press, I can walk you through how to fix this, but just know you're going to end up pulling your cams off. Are you comfortable with that? No? Okay, send your bow to me. I'll get it taken care of. And it's just, I have like a checklist of things that I kind of go down to make sure that, you stay on topic, but that, you don't stray too far. A good buddy of mine, he lives in Oregon now. He's from Idaho. Big muley freak also. He loves mule deer. And he called me and he goes, hey, I've seen all your stuff on Facebook and on Instagram. He's like, I would ship my bow to you. He goes, but I have all this stuff to do it. I just don't know how to do it. Like, can I pay for your time for you to just teach me how to do it? I was like, yeah, sure. And so I taught him how to tune his brand new RX-8. He got it all tuned up, shooting great, shooting bullet holes. And then he's like, all right, I'm going to try out a bunch of different fletchings. And he ended up shooting all like 17 different kinds of fletchings. And they all like grouped the exact same. He's like, I thought fletchings were like supposed to have a big impact on your accuracy. I was like, well, when your bow is tuned the right way, I said, the fletchings aren't really doing any steering. They're just correcting. So, I mean, you really don't need a whole lot of fletching on the back. So I'm not surprised that you have very similar results. And he's like, dude, I've fallen so much more in love with archery again now that my bow shoots right, and it's that kind of stuff that just keeps me going, lets me sleep like a baby at night.
It's really cool, man. Yeah, like you say, you got to be pretty experienced to be able to work on your bow and get a good tune it. So I bet the majority of them ship it to you and it just comes back and then it's just a shooter, like more so than trying to figure it out themselves because it's a steep learning curve. It takes a lot of years of figuring it out and being able to diagnose problems. So when you say factory spec, you're measuring axle to axle, you're checking that measurement. What else are you doing to make sure that bow's in factory spec, or is that it?
So usually, like, this is a thing that a bow technician taught me a long time ago, is when you're checking brace height, poundage, and ATA, he calls it the rule of three, is what he called it. If your brace height and your axle to axle is correct, then your poundage is correct. If your poundage and your axle to axle is correct, then your brace height is correct every single time. But if like, let's say your ATA is off and your poundage is off, then like if one of those is off, if there's not two that are on, the other one cannot be on. It just won't be on. So if only one of them is correct, like let's say your axle to axle is right, but your brace height is off, then your poundage is also going to be off. So I always, personally, the easiest things to check is axle to axle and poundage if you have a draw weight scale. So I always check poundage and ATA, and then I know the brace height will be set. And then as far as manufacturer spec goes, it all comes down to center shot after that. All my center shot, I set it up to whatever the manufacturer spec is, because some of them are like 7/8, some of them are 13/16, some of them are, somewhere in between there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, totally. That's what well, I don't check my brace. That's something new to me. I check my axle to axle and my poundage and and then make sure I have yeah, totally. Yeah, it sounds like I only need 2 out of 3. So when I'm checking my brace, is that pulled straight off your burger button to the string? Is that how they check your brace?
it should be from throat of the grip to the center of the string.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Is how I've always checked it, because that's how they check them on recurves too, is throat of the grip to center of the string. So that's how I've always checked them. I do know that most bows, like when you're checking poundage, I'd say when they're in spec, most bows are about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds heavy. Though I get a lot of guys that call me and they're like, well, my ATA is on, my brace height is on, but my poundage is 2 pounds heavy. I'm like, you're good to go, man. Like
Totally.
you're in the zone.
Yep, totally. No, that makes good sense. Yeah, man. Sounds like you're providing a really good service to these guys, and man, I bet there's nothing worse than being frustrated with a bow, or a bow that that you can't shoot, or that isn't in tune. Man, it's just like such a frustrating process. So yeah, you're really providing a good service for these guys, and it's when you understand bows too, like that working knowledge of being able to diagnose them. But it just means that no matter which bow you have, that it's going to be shooting right, and then comes down to executing a quality shot on those animals. So, man, that's really cool. I don't know how you have the time to fit in that many bows, but you're probably working a lot of evenings and weekends and early mornings and such, But it does pay for for your absolute passion and love of chasing mule deer. So that's pretty cool as well.
Yeah, I can usually crank out a bow per hour in like retrospect, but like if I have like a lot of bows here, what I'll do is I'll like take all of them and I'll just restring all of them at once. So I'll just, put one bow in the press, restring it, set it on the rack, put the next bow in the press, restring it, set it on the rack, put the next bow in, so on and so forth. And then I'll go back to the first one, and then I'll do tie my knock sets, tie my D loop, go to the next bow, tie knock sets, tie D loop, and I'll just go down the line. So when it comes to like shooting through paper, I'm just shooting all of them like back to back and then making the necessary adjustments. And I can usually knock them out pretty quick doing it that way. Which you can't really do that in a pro shop because usually the people are standing there like waiting. So you have to do start to finish on this bow, and then do start to finish on this bow, and then start to finish on the next bow. Versus like with this, I can just sit in the shop and I can just go boom, boom, boom right down the line, almost like an assembly line of each step of my process. And so it makes it go by really, really quick. I do have a handful of people that will drive or come to me, and my shop is ran out of my home, and so usually I vet people before I let them just come to my house. But once they come here, then I can work with them one-on-one. I don't change anything about my tuning method, and if they go to shoot it and they don't get a bullet hole, now we're working on your form, and once we get your form dialed in, then you're good to go, and we can leave. And I offer this to all my customers that ship their bows to me too. If you get your bow back and you do have any issues, I've never had one have any issues, but if you do have issues, give me a call and we'll FaceTime, or we'll do whatever we got to do so that I can watch you and make sure that you're not making some critical form mistake, which is 9 times out of 10 what the problem would be anyways.
Yeah, 100%, man. Yeah, it is. It does come down to form a lot of times with those bows. Yeah, man, that's amazing. Yeah, you're really setting those things up, and it makes sense. Like your knowledge base and your way you're able to run them through the assembly line. Like I can see how you can bust them out pretty quick. You've got a system now working on all those bows, and if you didn't, you'd be in trouble. You wouldn't have enough. There wouldn't be enough time in the day to set them all up. That's for sure. But yeah, man. Oh, those knock sets. Those are so important as well, right? Either side of the knock, just to make sure that you're not getting any knock pinch. That knock pinch can sure throw arrows in weird places, and also it seems like when your D loop is tight, your D loop can also pinch around your release as well, and it can make for a bit of a delayed shot, and especially as you twist your hand a bit on your anchor point. And so I think that's really important, and I still see a lot of guys' bows that don't have the knock sets either side, so that's pretty important to you. You just tie them in with serving, is that right?
Yeah, I tie them in with BCY 3D, and there's a few other things that I do that are like super essential to every setup. I tie about 5 foot of number 24 BCY number 24 D-loop material onto my riser, and I tie that on there. And every single customer, I I have a video of me showing people how to tie a D loop and how to retie their drop away cord if they need to. And I put 6 foot of D loop material on the riser if they want it. Otherwise, I put it in the box. So that way, they always have the material. If something breaks in the field, now they have a video to reference of, okay, this is how I tie a D loop. This is how it was tied before. But those knock sets are holding that knocking point. So if your D loop breaks, now all you got to do is just whittle away at that D loop, cut the D loop off, and your knocking point won't change. You just need to tie a new D loop. Versus if you don't have knock sets and your D loop breaks and you're in the field, now you got to try to eyeball this thing back to center and tie a new D loop on. The knock set's going to hold that knocking position, and all my customer would have to do is just tie a new D loop on. And so I always send extra D loop material with all my customers so that they have it in case they need it. We always hope to God that you'll never need a bow repair kit in the field, but in the case that it happens, I try to get ahead of it and either tie it onto the riser so that they always know that they have it, or send it in the box if they don't want it on their riser.
Dude, that's so smart. I always have it in my pack, like I have got a little bow kit that I carry, but I like that tying it to the riser. Yeah, that's pretty smart. And I hadn't thought about that I mean, it makes total sense with the knocking points. Then your tune doesn't change, nothing changes, and you're able to replace that D loop really easy. I mean, I guess that makes total sense to me. I just never thought about it that way. But yeah, it does make it really easy because I know I can replace my D loops and I didn't change my tune or anything. So that makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah, the big reason I like to put the D loop on my riser is, I'm sure you've done it before, where you put something in your pack and you're in the back country and then you need it and you're like tearing apart your pack looking for this one, whether it's a lighter or something stupid that, should just be readily available, and it's just not in that spot. If my D loop breaks, I don't have to search for D loop material. I know that it is sitting right on my riser, and all I got to do is take my knife, cut the burnt end off, unravel it, cut it off, reburn it, retie it back down, tie my new D loop, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, that's money, man. I like that. Yeah, that's good thinking. So yeah, big plans for this year, right? You've been putting in for your muley tags, trying to plan out your season, and it sounds like when you mentioned the one hunt, you were hunting them late October, and you killed that buck with some does, so he must have been like early rutting. But are you hunting a lot of the early season? You hunting a lot of the rut, a lot of the pre-rut, or pretty much any time you can go hunt muleys?
So if it's a high country hunt, I definitely prefer to hunt early season. Open country, I really, really like the pre-rut. Early to mid October is like my favorite time to hunt open country. Even just a little bit into late October. I made a secondary trip last year in November, and I had a very good hunt, and it was a successful hunt. And it was in a completely new spot. This spot I went to in October, I had been to prior, and I didn't kill that buck at 12 yards. And then over Thanksgiving, I had a couple extra days off of work, and I was like, yeah, I can swing it. Let's go. And I took my fiance with me, and she went out there, and it was cold and it was brutal. And I went to a spot that was a little bit closer to home, a spot that I'd never been, and I got on so many bucks out there. And it was a good hunt, successful hunt. Everything was picture perfect. So I definitely prefer in the open country setting. I like the early to mid to late October, basically the whole month of October. I really, really like in the open country. So this year I'm going to be in the high country of Colorado opening day, and then I will be in Montana, hopefully going to be in Montana in like the first to second week of October. And then we're going to Alaska in January, I want to say it's January. We're going to Alaska early in 2025. So I'm not doing a third hunting trip out west.
Yep. What are you doing in Alaska? Just vacationing up there?
Yeah, we're going to go up there just to visit this time around, but then my fiance really wants to caribou hunt, so we'll end up going back up and caribou hunting in the fall.
Mhm.
So
Well, dude, that's not typical. You've kind of found your niche. Like it's wild, like hunting that October, like that secondary living can, or that, like post alpine living or post like early season and then pre rut can be a difficult season to be able to find them. But I find the same thing. I kill a lot more bucks in October than I do in November. Like I love hunting the rut, and I want to hunt the rut every single year in November. It's like really special to me, and I'll hunt a couple different states. But I actually think I kill more deer in October in that pre-rut, and they can be tough to find. Like it seems like you got to look over a bunch of different drainages before you find the one where the bucks are at. And so they're not all over. They're not with the does typically, but they seem like they're susceptible. Like they're
right,
patternable, and they're just like feeding on a feature, and they're focused on feeding and bedding, but they're not moving like crazy like during the rut. And it just seems, and the pressure is totally off, so you have it all to yourself usually with very little pressure. And so I like hunting those October seasons, and probably the last, I bet you 6 or 7 years, like I've killed an October buck at least one, and so I think you stating that, like it brings it present to mind, and I do have plans to hunt next October. See, our elk season in Montana stretches to about mid-October, so a lot of times I use that early October to hunt elk as well. But yeah, last year killed a buck in October, if not two of them. Trying to think. Yeah, I killed 2 bucks in October last year. It might have been November 1st, but it was still pre-rut. Like just start,
right.
like they were just staging for the rut. But that's really cool that you've keyed into that October hunting and had good success doing it. I think they're susceptible to kill that time of year.
The thing for me in October, I think, is like early season in the high country. When you find bucks, you usually find a lot of bucks and there's just a lot of eyes. And then when you go into like that mid to late October, when you find bucks, you usually find 1 or 2 or 3 bucks, but there's just not near the amount of eyes on you because the bucks aren't like right up next to each other and like really bachelored up and they're close to each other, but they're not right on top of each other because they're getting ready to be ready for the rut, and you don't got to worry. They're not real close to the does, so you don't got to worry about spooking does. And I think that's what I really like about October is I find it just a little bit easier to get good quality stocks in that October time frame.
Dude, that's really smart. Yeah, like you're keyed into it. You're right. They start breaking off from the big groups, and they're more in ones and twos. And you can still find a group of 5 bucks. And I do find that when I find the bucks, there's a lot of bucks around. They're just not all together. Like they might
Right.
be in the drainage and they're in ones and twos, but I might find 5 or 7 or 8 in the drainage or something. But that's really smart. And also, as it gets into November and that bitter cold, you can't hold still as long. Like the vantage points get tougher, and then also it's like, man, it sucks for a bow hunter in the snow. It's like, yeah, they
Oh,
stick out a little bit more, but hunting snow for bucks is really, really difficult. The crunch of the snow, or you got to let it melt off. And so it just ups the degree of difficulty. And so, yeah, like a lot of times when I'm waiting on these November hunts or hunting deep snow, man, they're high degree of difficulty trying to hunt them in that snow. So I really like what you've keyed into. And I've kind of like starting to shape up my season, but I think I've got to spend more time in that October season, like trying to focus on multiple different states or a couple different bucks, because you're right, man, they're super susceptible, and it seems like I'm always killing a good buck in October.
yeah, and the other thing for me is I find that like you really um I'm about to blow up October for us. I feel like you run into more genuine hardcore bow hunters in October. I ran into a guy in South Dakota this last year on November 17th. It was like November 17th, and I was like 2 miles back, and it was like -2 degrees, no snow on the ground, 25-mile-an-hour winds. And I see this guy come walking on the top that I'm glassing off of. And I like look at him through my glass, and sure enough, he's got a bow in hand. He like walks over, I wave at him, he came over. We ended up hunting for 3 days together. And I'd never met this guy in my life. And I was like, dude, are you from here? He's like, nope, I'm from out of state. He goes, this is my third trip up here. He goes, I wanted to check this area out, this, that, and the other thing. And I feel like I meet more genuine, like more people that are willing to share information, share stories, share a camp, and just more less overall pressure, but the pressure that is there is more like quality guys that I can just really get down with and be like, hey, like you spotted that buck, I'll guide you in, like good luck, is what I tend to run into more in that October time frame.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, too, it's like the more knowledgeable hardcore hunter that you run into, he's less apt to blow up your stock or to just be wandering through country blowing deer up or whatever. Like you say, those are the guys that know what they're doing, and they also they don't want to screw up your hunt, or they show like a lot of respect for like the guys they do run into. So yeah, dude, makes sense. Yeah, that's great, a great tip. Well, dude, it's been like so nice to like meet you and be able to have an in-depth conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
You got to come back on the podcast and tell me about your season this year.
Yeah, for sure. I really appreciate you having me on, Brian. This was a blast, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Oh, you're the man. So yeah, make sure to get a hold of him on your bow and follow him on social media. So thanks a bunch, Jesse. Yeah, that was a pleasure, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Brian.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. Oh, such a fun conversation with Jesse. So knowledgeable, about mule deer, about bows. So I thought this is like timely to get this podcast out as it's April now and guys are getting their bows set up, getting practice up for season, and definitely an accurate, forgiving bow is going to make you more successful in the field. So thanks to Jesse sharing so much great information. You can follow him at Bergy Bowsmith. He's got a great Instagram page, and then yeah, you can reach out to him there if you want him to work on your bow. It sounds like he's got his shipping dialed, his workmanship dialed on these bows, so you're going to get a real accurate setup. So thanks again for him coming on, sharing so much information. I want to thank today's sponsors. I want to thank Matthews, Savage, Stone Glacier. I want to thank Black Ovis and Camo Fire. So thanks to those guys that help me bring you this podcast each and every week. And thanks to you guys. The reviews on iTunes, Spotify, those really help out with the algorithm, and the shares on social media on IG, really appreciate that. I try to reshare people that share the podcast, and for engaging in it, questions that we can answer on the podcast. So I just really appreciate the community that we built, and really appreciate you guys reaching out, DMing me, telling me how much you enjoy the podcast. Also DMing my guests and telling them how much you liked hearing them on the podcast. These guys are taking time out of their schedule. They're sharing these hard-earned secrets about Western hunting. So if you enjoy it, reach out to them, tell them you enjoyed them on the podcast. Helps me get better guests and helps me keep this whole thing rolling. So thanks to you guys for that. Thanks to Eastmans for their support. Run over to the office here, get some work done, and man, it's been good for me. I started bear hunting, had that send for that big jet black I told you guys about last week on the exit of the podcast, and yeah, it's been a little bit slow waiting for the grass to green up, but I'm going to hit a spot today on my way to the Eastman's office, see if I can't turn another one up, get another play with my bow. But training's been going 100, like really putting my everything into it, like going to take my game to the next level. My consistent weight training, definitely putting some muscle on, and I just find that I pull my back and my neck out less, and I'm stronger, like I'm really good on the job site. So it's really helped me. Helped me for strength, for packing animals out, for recovery. It's going to help me packing my pack. So really proud of my effort there. I'm getting my runs in. I'm not quite 7 days a week. Definitely missing a couple days due to bear hunting and due to just being busy at work and things. But definitely like getting in at least 5 days a week and a workout every single day. So yeah, it's been going really good. And then, my map research, just taking that to another level of really taking notes on these hunts and making a plan, marking waypoints on OnX and things. And yeah, so I'm just really taking it to the next level, as in all facets. Like it's talking the talk and it's also walking the walk, and just trying to put more effort into it. We have so much time where we sit down or we watch a show, and I'm all for entertainment. I'm all for spending quality time with my wife and my family, but I can be on that OnX, or I can be on that Google Earth scouting, and learning these units like the back of my hand, and having a really good plan together for hunting these places, and have a written plan down in my notes so I can refer back to it. So just really putting the time and effort in. Also working to get construction work done so I can be freed up for this fall. And mine's in a great place, and training's in a great place, and it's going to show up as far as results this season. I am going to chase some real giant critters around, and I'm going to get some good arrows in them. So yeah, I just can't wait. Super excited for this season, as I know you guys are too. Hard work pays off, so keep working hard towards your goals. I'm going to keep getting these quality podcasts out to you, just like today's podcast, and I've got some good weeks coming up, so super pumped, and reaching out to guys to get you guys some good information here coming into season. So pulling for all your guys' success. Keep putting the work in. It pays off, and with that, I'll check in with you guys next week.